The South by Kathleen Corky Culver. Yes, well, there's South and South. There's the collard greens cooked in a wok without pork fat South. The South that doesn't belong to anyone, especially those who think they own it. The South of fountains in the park and everyone in town knowing about the one gay boy in white and the 6 football linemen. In a video camera that sees a fountain and sometimes a gray-haired woman telling stories, but not the linemen, not the gay boy, the Southern boy. There's a South where sand streets and Black neighborhoods act like fog and sweetly slow the traffic and make the world seem quiet and full of surprises like vegetable gardens in the front yard and clothes hanging on fences and voodoo statues seen through doorways. The Southern towns where on a sunny day, people still take shelter under pink and green umbrellas as they stroll by Mott's tire store and Howard Johnson's orange roof and by yards where people leave sour orange trees alive for decoration and their fruit lies on the ground without notice. It's the South, where a woman stands on the porch of a beach house, a brow of civilization brooding on an expanse of ocean where it can't go or can only go in spirit. The South of all porches before air conditionings, the porches where you hear your neighbors, and your neighbors might be the Joneses arguing, or it might be Los Angeles filling a dumpster with paper and looking for Atlanta to light the match.
The South, where metal racks of brochures of the Chamber of Commerce advertised the Bible Belt, forbidden caverns, the Cave of the Four Gospels. See the holy city built entirely out of bottle caps. And see the bridge where Dr. King led a march into the mouths of police dogs and under the hooves of police horses, and where the ankles and wrists of a woman twisted in the hands of police, and the loose collar of her blue dress dragged in the street. Yes, it's the South, where churches have long names. The Temple of the Washed, Sanctified, and Redeemed, singing together into glory, brotherhood, and sisterhood church. Where churches buckle the belts of the empty 2-lane roads that wind through flooded fields with bits of cotton clinging to the barbed wire and bracken. The South, where the Klan set a burning cross in the yard of the house that Frank Lloyd Wright designed, and where the Rosenbaums had a party that night anyway. And teenagers kept up their courage by singing Peter and Paul and Mary songs. And it seemed like everyone got drunk, some for the first time. And these nights may have gotten compressed by storytelling. But the next week, we took down signs that said colored and white, as someone put them back up again. And again, we took them down, and on until now, the only ones left are invisible.
We just heard Mandy Carter and Barbara Esther reading the beginning stanzas of a poem titled The South, written by Corky Culver, a Southern lesbian feminist activist poet. 4 more readers will continue reading from this poem during our presentation. These readers will be Deborah Gish, Jay Vaughn, Corky Culver, and the Reverend Carolyn Mobley Bowie. Most non-Southerners think of the South as a place of burning crosses, racial violence, segregation, ignorance, and Scarlett O'Haras. Few folks know anything about the activists, the ones who did not get their names in the news, who were not mostly men, who nevertheless worked for social justice, worked to protect women and children, were actively engaged in medicine, community support, culture and the arts, homesteading, and lesbian feminist revolution. Recently, an Olaf Dyke said, there was no lesbian activism in the South, was there? And at another time, another Dyke said, of course, there weren't any radical lesbian activists in the South. We have been hearing disparaging statements like these about the South since the 1960s second wave of feminism. We had noticed the recognition of publications by and about lesbian feminist activism in the United States focused on the women in the Northeast, especially New York and in California. We noticed the absence of any mention of lesbian feminist activism in the South in memoirs and histories of the women's movement. We also noticed the attitudes of these women when they came South to teach us poor, ignorant, dependent lesbians how to do proper activism. They didn't notice that we disliked being their stereotypes. They had no idea what was happening in our communities. However, among our own, in the places where we lived, Southern lesbian feminists were moving and shaking. We were organizing multi-state meetings to build lesbian feminist support networks. While in our individual communities, we worked with both lesbian and straight feminists to organize women's clinics, battered women's shelters, coffee houses, bookstores, softball teams, choruses, land collectives, newsletters, self-help groups, and political demonstrations. We were involved with women's music, theater, and writers' conferences. We worked for civil rights, worked in prisons and peace encampments, worked on women's issues in general and lesbian issues in particular. We engaged in true revolution, bringing many positive changes to systems and communities in which we were involved. We demonstrated lesbian feminist values and ways of interacting in our neighborhoods and workplaces. We were outspoken about racism, sexism, ageism, classism, ableism, and other forms of oppressive behavior. We tried to be good role models, to educate others about issues, and to effect change wherever possible. We were askers and listeners, guides and facilitators, and in true Southern fashion, friends and neighbors. However, despite the significant work that we were doing, our achievements and even our very existence were largely ignored outside our own communities. We muttered about this to one another, and we finally decided to have a workshop at our semi-annual writers' conference, Woman Rights, to devise a plan for bringing Southern lesbian feminist activism and activists into the mainstream of lesbian feminist history. During that first workshop in 2009, we rolled out a sheet of butcher paper onto the floor of the porch and developed a timeline of activism in the South. Every dyke who remembered events and actions wrote it in with the date or dates, maybe the state, and soon the paper was filled down its length. We talked and wrote and laughed and reminisced, and our energy rose higher and higher. We considered the list to be a work in progress, and someone took it home. We lost that roll of paper, but not the determination to get all that activism on the record. We just needed to figure out how, where, and who. And thus, the Southern Lesbian Feminist Activist Herstory Project was born. We are a large and fluid group of old, white, mostly able-bodied, functionally literate dykes who identify as Southern lesbian feminist activists. We welcome other volunteers of any age, ethnicity, ability. We'd love to have more lesbian diversity on our working body. Because we are so white, we are committed to documenting the stories of as many lesbians of color as we can find, the work that they did, and their experiences as lesbians of color. Their stories, like every story we have collected, are told in their own words, either through interviews or writing, and then archived. And now we return to the poem, The South, read here by Deborah Gish and Jay Vaughn.
It's the South, where you can pick up shells on the barrier reefs to put on dashboards of Volkswagen vans, and where you can pick up both Canadian newspapers and boxes of grits at the Handyway, and where you can pick up bits of African patois that forms the basic dialects of both the Georgia Sea Islands and the drawing rooms of Savannah bankers. There's a new version of Southern hospitality, the underground sanctuary movement, hiding children from the perpetrators of their rapes, from the law that gave the perpetrators custody. Black and white women together, doctors' wives, houseworkers, lawyers, joined to pass out leaflets, flood over the streets, young flaring with fury, the silver-haired old, a tidal wave of raging whitecaps, the once binding proprieties of Southern women, now wielded as weapons of defiance of their own men, the judges and sheriffs, their sons, husbands, and brothers. This is Mississippi? Asked Gopher, dumbfounded. She grew up there. Yes, these ladies picketing the Hattiesburg jail. Yes, these once silenced women passing out leaflets that report the torn hymen of a 4-year-old girl. Ladies coming out publicly, breaking the taboos, telling the secrets. This is the South. The mellifluous accents interviewed now in Boston and San Francisco and Washington. No, sir, we won't leave this child unbefriended. The song of the Delta spreading across the world, the Harrisons, the Singleys, Chrissy Foxworth, the Newsomes. Who hid this girl, asked the judge. And voices all over the Delta and the Gulf Coast said, I did. I did. Yes, sir, I did.
I believe it's Miss Vaughn that's supposed to be talking.
Jay's next.
And if some of these ladies hurt their own children, let that be said. And if anyone be unjustly accused, let that be said. And of those who were hurt in their childhoods, let that be told. To be sure, that's the South. Yes, ma'am, the South of the African American Festival of the Yoruba ceremony on the stage of the University South, where Winnie Mandela speaks and feels right at home, she says. And there's Fannie Lou Hamer Day and the Klan Watch and the Southern Poverty Law Center and the Center for Democratic Renewal, and people hanging up signs in their windows. A black hand and a white hand claps in a handshake. Hate-free zone. There's the South of the WC Handy Festival, the cakewalk, the jazz music the whites in town are just lately proud of. That South. And next door, there's the still segregated South, where some doctors receive patients from separate waiting rooms. Such last doctors are rare now, rare and bloody as a steak, charcoal that smells up a city block with burning flesh lit with lighter fluid.
You're muted, Rose. Rose, you're muted.
Thank you, Deborah and Jay. The concluding stanzas of the South will be read at the end of the program. When we started this project, we did not know what we were doing or where it was going, and we didn't think of it as an oral history project. We thought we would be collecting memoirs and publishing them somewhere and maybe archiving them. It took us about 3 years to realize that interviews would be our best way of collecting and preserving these stories of lesbian feminist activism in the South. Luckily, I had retired from college teaching by then and was free to travel in pursuit of these stories. I attended an oral history workshop at Woman Rights run by a PhD candidate in the oral history PhD program at the University of Florida, and set out for a week of interviews in Gainesville, Florida, which I knew to be a hotbed of lesbian feminist activism. Eventually, I began doing phone interviews too, and have completed over 100 interviews since 2012. The project now has about 16 interviewers, often recording in-person stories from their friends and acquaintances. We soon realized that we needed to figure out what to do with all these stories. That's when Barbara Esther, a project member who read from the poem, said, why don't we ask Sinister Wisdom to do a special issue about the project? And that began a long association with Sinister Wisdom, which, if you don't know, is the multicultural lesbian literary and art journal, which has been around since 1976, doing wonderful work. Our association with Sinister Wisdom has been transformative, has shaped our process and given a major boost to the project. We began to focus on themes and to seek out interviews with women who could contribute to various themes, especially women's land groups and cultural activism, music, art, theater. Our first Sinister Wisdom special issue came out in 2014 and covered a variety of topics, from the Atlanta Lesbian Feminist Alliance, ALPHA, an organization that flourished from 1972 to 94, to the Black Women's Health Project that began in the 80s, and Southerners on New Ground that began in 1992, 93. Those last two are still around today. Sinister Wisdom even did a special web page to publish 17 of the interviews that we used in our first issue. And Deirdre's going to share this link to the page where you can go and read those 17 interviews in the SW93 supplement. And this will also, Mev is going to paste that link in the chat. Deirdre, you're going to share screen on that page? Well, anyway, it's sinisterwisdom.org/SW93 supplement, 17 interviews. We ended that first special issue of Sinister Wisdom with a timeline that resurrected that butcher paper timeline that we lost. It begins with Judith Brown co-authoring Toward a Female Liberation Movement in Gainesville, Florida in 1968. And it ends in 1994 when Alpha closed its doors and Song got started. In the second issue about women's land groups, we extended our coverage to the end of the 20th century. And last year we published our 6th and last special issue. All 6 of our special issues are now available as a boxed set from Sinister Wisdom. And this is another screen share, sinisterwisdom.org/oral historians. Has pictures of the boxed set, and there's a poster. Sinister Wisdom has just done wonders. There it is, the box set. And if you go on down, you can also see a poster that you can buy about the project. And Mev is pasting that link into the chat too. There's pictures of the covers, and a shout out here to Robin Toller, who's the artist who did the paintings that we used for all those covers. Along the way for those 6 special issues, we learned a whole lot about what was going on in other places like Louisville and Durham and Richmond, Virginia. And we realized that we needed to find a place to archive the materials that we were collecting. My friend and colleague and fellow college professor, newly retired now, Beth York, will pick up the story here.
Besides our 6 special editions of Sinister Wisdom, archives of the Southern Lesbian Feminist Activist Herstory Project are stored in the David Rubenstein Rare Book and Manuscript Library at Duke University in Durham, North Carolina. Within that library is a special collection known as the Sally Bingham Center for Women's History and Culture, directed by Laura Meacham and curated by Kelly Wooten. Rose Norman and I arranged to visit on 2 separate occasions to view their holdings. Rose was particularly interested in the papers of Mab Sechrist, an early member and co-founder of Women Rights. I was working on autobiographical pieces about my early work in women's music in Atlanta. I viewed collections from the Atlanta Lesbian Feminist Alliance, and within that collection were papers from Lucina's Music and Orchid Productions that also contained my own personal files. I subsequently interviewed original members of Alpha, Lucina's Music, Orchid Productions, and the Atlanta Feminist Women's Chorus. Our second visit was funded by a Mary Lilly research grant from Duke University. These grants support the work of scholars who travel to Duke to use the Bingham Center's collections. Follow-up conversations with Laura and Kelly resulted in memoranda of agreement to transfer our files and my own personal files. So the Southern Lesbian Feminist Activist Herstory Project archives contain original recordings and transcriptions that have been conducted to date. Materials are being added on an ongoing basis. Mev is posting the link to the Duke repository in the chat, and there also is a screen share. The Sally Bingham Center also highlighted the release of the 4th Sinister Wisdom Special Edition entitled Hotspots, Creating Lesbian Space in the South, in their 2018 newsletter. We're very grateful for the support of our work by Duke University through the Sally Bingham Center. After completing our series with Sinister Wisdom, we realized that the project needed a new direction. We had received a donation and could afford to pay someone to build a website. Susan Roy agreed to become our web person. And now I'm happy to introduce Susan, who will tell you all about the website.
I was present at the group's initial 2009 workshop at Women Rights where the project was conceived, but I didn't have time to work on it then, so I dropped out. Fast forward to July 2021 when Rose contacted me about developing a website for the Southern Lesbian Feminist Activist Herstory Project. I was referred by Deborah Gish because of the work I had done with her on Crone Chronicles 2020. Mev has pasted the link to the website in the chat, and I need permission to screen share so I can share that website with you. There we go. Okay. So so this is the website. And I'll start out by saying that it took us almost a year to develop and launch the website. We formed a web content committee of 7 women within the larger Herstory Project group. This was the first website that I had built from scratch, and they knew that. So the price was right. They were patient while I grappled with the learning curve. We chose WordPress as our platform because that's where most of my experience was. I explained that they would incur expenses beyond my fee, and the first would be paying for a domain name and a website hosting service, which would then become recurring expenses. We started at the very beginning. What material would be published on the website, how much was already in hand, how much was in the works, and how did they want the material arranged? We agreed that we would provide information about publishing 6 special issues of Sinister Wisdom, for example, but we knew that the website would be about more than the Sinister Wisdom material. What would the web pages look like? Colors, images, logo? We met regularly on Zoom to work out the details. Committee members provided feedback on web page layout ideas. Group members suggested logo designs and provided drawings to illustrate their ideas. One member, Gail Reeder, has a sister who is a graphic designer, and Mel became a key resource for us. She looked at the logo designs we were considering and came back with one iteration after another until at a momentous Zoom meeting, we reached consensus. Mel also created a banner for the top of the website, and we were on our way. The website includes many of the interviews that served as source material for the 6 special issues of Sinister Wisdom. We are also adding feature stories as we write them about some of the women we've interviewed, and project members still continue to interview more lesbians who were feminist activists in the South during the 20th century. We don't anticipate running out of material to add to the website anytime soon. Now for a quick tour. First, here's the spotlight feature in the center, a headline, a photo, and a teaser. Clicking on the link at the bottom of this takes you to the page where the story or the spotlight story or interview is posted. We publish both feature stories and interviews on the website, and this one is a feature story that links to interviews. Here's an interview, and at the top of each interview, you can see we have a biographical note, and if you click on Read Full Bio at the bottom of it, you'll see a biographical sketch of the woman who is interviewed. We change the spotlight once a month, usually on the first Monday, to keep the homepage fresh and to rotate who's featured on the website front and center. So eventually every interview and feature story will be spotlighted. You're scheduling pieces about lesbians of color for the spotlight position every other month. On the right, you see a list of 7 categories, and you can click on those if you want to navigate by subject matter, such as culture and the arts, or lesbian land groups, for example. This shows you all of the pieces that belong to this category. Each interview or feature story belongs to one or more of those 7 categories. On the top menu, we have the Showcase tab. If you click on Showcase, you'll see teasers for each interview and feature story. chronologically by the date they were added to the website, with the most recent piece on top. You can also click on an alphabetical list of the interviews and feature stories. We have a page listing all of the contributors to the project, including the women interviewed, the interviewers, and Rose will talk more about the contributors in a moment. There's a tab leading you to other resources, including other lesbian archive projects and collections. And we have a page where you can contact us to suggest other lesbian feminist activists in the South whose stories would expand and enrich the project. Excuse me. Once we launched the website, I began working with Rose and several other women in the group who were interested in learning how to update the website themselves and how to post new material. Now I meet with 4 women once a week on Zoom to post new interviews, stories, and bios as they are completed. After this Zoom session today, we hope you will go to the website and explore it on your own. And now the final stanzas of Corky Culver's poem, The South, read by Corky Culver and Reverend Carolyn Mobley Bowie.
It's the South. It's the fluid South. The changing turquoise rivers that were the sliding roads of Indians, secured now by routed wood signs, the last sanctuaries of wilderness, where public access signs mark the dead-end streets of the southern beaches, the tender weed-sweetened cracks between mammoth condominiums with guards at the gates. Now no one's from the South, and people miss the Vermont seasons and remember snow and think they still need 4-wheel drive for the snowy white sand. That's the people seasoning grits with tamari South. Now the magnolia blossoms over people chewing peyote buttons, and the good weather brings BMWs and Monte Carlos and the homeless.
Now, the salt water tosses in the southern surf, and the lesbian community of 13 homes celebrates its 13th year. Now, on a coral reef nestling under the banana trees, there's a Center for the Study of Nonviolent Civil Disobedience. Now, Robert E. Lee has been kicked out of the office of model Southern gentleman, and John Lewis has been elected. Now, there's a town named Casadega, Place of God, where Northern spiritualists came and stayed, where today you can get a room with a porch and a psychic reading. Now still, dolphins swim in perfect curves, making blessings up and down the coast. Now still, there's the y'all come on over South, the slow Southern drawl, the palmettos prickling the Southern air. And there's the South with an itch, the South where visionaries move to pare down a beginning dream of paradise to more skin in the wind. The South where vision can begin again.
Thank you, Corky and Carolyn, and all the readers of Corky Culver's poem, The South. All 6 readers are contributors to our Herstory project as interviewers, interviewees, authors, and editors. Altogether, almost 200 lesbians have contributed to the project. Deirdre, if you'll share the page with the contributors link. Susan showed you the beginning of that. That first list, I think that's 180 people that we've interviewed, well over 100 interviews. They're not all archived yet at Duke. And then we've got 14 interviewers, 69 authors and editors. Mev is pasting that link in the chat. Many of our 36 project members, you see there, if their name is underlined, we have their bio posted. It's a big project to get those bios posted. Many of those project members have done one or more of those jobs: interviewing, being interviewed, writing feature stories, editing, especially editing. And we welcome more contributors. Especially we want people to do all those jobs, plus new jobs associated with preparing interviews to be posted on our website. We're still collecting stories. And we have a page on our website that Susan showed you, showing you how you can donate your story, time, or other resources. And there's the donate page that tells you that we'd like to collect your story. And if you don't have a story, you can send us money. And that concludes our program, and we're ready to listen to your questions and answer them if we can. Mev is going to organize that.